All right, so we are live, everyone. My name's Jesse. Thanks for sticking around after our last presentation with Daisy just a minute ago. And we are continuing our Global Biodiversity Festival. So again, 50 speakers, 3 days, all in support of 6 incredible conservation organizations in Madagascar, Costa Rica, Florida, and around East Africa. Again, if everyone who has tuned in over our last few hours gave $15, our fundraiser would be done already. So we encourage you to help out. We're really trying to do a great deal of good for some amazing organizations and people. Just consider that on our website at globalbiofest.com. All right, the reason you guys are all here is for our speaker. So we are joined live on a fascinating and unique topic over the next 3 days by Richard Kock. So he is a wildlife veterinary ecologist, and his talk today is going to be on COVID-19 and biodiversity. Being our only talk on COVID-19, it is extremely popular. So we're excited to dive in, learn a little bit more about what Richard has done in his career and a little bit more about this virus plaguing us and maybe how it links to biodiversity. Without further ado, joining us all the way from the UK, thank you so much for joining us, Richard, and take us away.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. It's such a strange world at the moment where everybody's doing things virtually. So I just hope you'll put up with, odd background. So I'm based in the United Kingdom. I actually work now with the Royal Veterinary College, which is a university, part of the University of London. And I've been working for 40 years in wildlife. So I'm a professor of emerging infectious diseases and wildlife health. So it sort of gives me a very privileged position. I spent most of my sort of more practical career working in East Africa, actually based in Kenya, and I set up a veterinary department at the wildlife service there and worked for the African Union in a number of countries, helping to set up capacity in infectious diseases. So I have a sort of pretty unique perspective on some of the biodiversity issues. I've worked in conservation a lot with IUCN. I co-chair with Billy Koresh of EcoHealth Alliance, the wildlife health specialist group of the IUCN. We just had an IUCN person on talking about nature solutions. So I'm a sort of odd guy, in the health field. There aren't too many of us who work in wildlife disease. And why wildlife disease in the context of COVID-19? COVID-19 actually is a human disease. Everybody calls it a zoonosis, but actually it's not really. It's a disease that is transmitted from humans to humans. So the virus itself is called SARS-CoV-2, and it's called SARS-CoV-2 because guess what? It's the second. It's not the first time this has happened. Back in 2003, there was a similar event, again in China. Gives you clues to where this comes from, and it led to a pretty serious problem and the beginnings of a pandemic. But fortunately, and we can all argue as to why, it was eliminated, it was stopped. And so we never ended up in this extraordinary situation we're in now. So I've been working in this field for a long time, and I've worked actually on pandemic viruses a lot, things like rinderpest, which was a big problem in the world from about the 14th, 15th century, causing very high mortality in cattle and so on. But it also affects wildlife and had a big impact in Africa. It wiped out huge numbers of hoofed mammals back in the 1890s, 1900s, and persisted till its eradication in about 2010. So these viruses, once they get going, can do a lot of damage and can cause very large population declines. And in fact, if you look at the whole sort of distribution and geography of the susceptible wild animals in Africa, it's related actually partly to that virus and where it was able to survive and where it wasn't. And so, these are important creatures. Microorganisms are part of biodiversity, let's not get that wrong. And there are millions of viruses, millions, and bacteria and funguses and so on. And actually, they're absolutely vital to life on Earth. Without them, we're all dead. They keep us healthy, actually. So let's not get confused between what we call pathogens. There are only actually about 1,400 pathogens that come from animals that we are concerned about. That's nothing compared to what, if you like, potentially there could be. If all the microorganisms, all the biodiversity of microorganisms decided to attack human beings, we wouldn't have a chance. I can tell you that. We would all be gone very quickly. So so we need to look at this problem and try and decide actually what's gone wrong here. What has happened here? Is this a natural thing? And some people will argue that all we're seeing is biology at work. There are 7 billion of us. We also have a huge number of domestic animals, and I think conservationists on the whole and nature people don't really appreciate what has happened to the planet. About 96% of the mammal biomass is domestic. 96%. It's only 4% that's left that is natural, or species that the other species of mammal. So it just shows you how transformed our world is. And I've worked in lots of protected area systems, and I've worked with conservation groups and wildlife management authorities and so on. And of course, people are trying to do their best. But let's face it, conservation globally to date really has failed. We have failed the planet as a human species to recognize, in a sense, that things cannot go on like this. And the consequences are various. We talk about climate change, but emerging infectious diseases are really, to me, as important. I published a paper back in 2014, which was really describing, I said, would we suffer emerging infectious diseases before we feel the heat? In other words, I was trying to say, we're worried about climate change, but actually there's some very much more imminent problems. And one of those is the impact of emergent diseases. And we all know about the Ebola viruses, the HIVs, but we've now had these coronaviruses, which are now becoming, everybody knows about coronavirus. And we're in the middle of it, and it's having a big impact. So why is it there? Now, I'm going to just share the screen just to give you a sense, of what's going on here from the perspective of, if I can find it, it seems to have gone. I'm just going to see if I can find it again. It seems to have disappeared. We practice this. We practiced this, and now it seems to have gone.
That's half the fun. There has to be something technically to go wrong. So yeah, bottom middle of your screen, big green guy, big green button should bring it up.
Yeah, but I've just got to find it's where the actual file's gone. That was the problem. Anyway, I don't know where it's gone. It seemed to have just disappeared. All right, I think just to, yeah, that'll be fine. Have we got that now? It wasn't exactly what I prepared, but anyway. Have we got
quite.
that?
So you have the file up, but we haven't shared it yet. No.
Okay, so how do hang on, let me just see. All right. Yeah, this is the trouble with these technologies. Let me just
like actual viruses try to evade our attempts to.
It is.
Sometimes virus files.
Let me try and share again.
Okay.
I'll go to and I'll try that now. I think that's going to do it now.
Let's see.
Okay, and we try that. Does that come now?
Coming up, perfect. Ecosystem interfaces, food systems.
All right. Okay, so when we look at the situation in China with the SARS viruses, in 2003 we had a very similar thing happen, and we believe that a family of viruses were present in bat populations in South China. These are the rhinolophus bats, the horseshoe bats. And we believe somehow there was a spillover from these bats to probably an intermediate species, which could have been the civet cat, palm civet, possibly a raccoon dog. And these animals are traded, and they are kept in farms. They are produced for food. So they're really part of the food system. And I'm not going to discuss whether it's bad or good or whatever to use one animal or another for food. We all do it. And some of us are vegetarian and so on, and that's great. But it's just in that part of the world, these animals we think of as wild animals actually are part of the food system. So we think probably the virus, and certainly for the SARS outbreak in 2003, we had evidence that the virus got into these raccoons and raccoon dogs and to the civet, palm civet, and then got traded through markets. And the virus then was spread from those animals. It adapted to those animals, was able to live in those animals, and then was able to spread into humans. And so we believe probably the same sort of situation arose for the COVID-19. But the fact is that we never actually found the virus in any bats in South China or anywhere else, actually. So the virus, so it's a real sort of enigma as to exactly, where this virus was. Maybe it changed. Maybe it was a virus that then, in the process of adaptation, and this may have taken years. And this is why it sort of comes back to the whole biodiversity story. So what was making that virus spill over into another animal? Well, clearly you need contact. And so if we look at biodiversity and we look at the habitats for nature, they're under enormous pressure. So we have a lot of people and a lot of domestic animals and farming and so on, pressurizing the ecosystems that remain, in which perhaps a bat might live, or a colony of bats. And often these colonies of bats, like rats, live actually within human systems. They adapt quite well to humans. So we have this sort of unfortunate intensity of interaction occurring. And so the virus, which is just an entity that, it's an enveloped entity that needs a host, it's always looking for a new host. And if it happens to spill into a different species, it may have the capacity to adapt to that host cell, invade it, and then continue its journey of survival. And then through a process of movement of these animals over time into things like markets, and you've all heard about the Wuhan seafood market, they then get into close contact with humans in large numbers. And if that virus is able to adapt to the human cell, then you end up with an epidemic. And once it starts transmitting between humans, it doesn't really matter anymore. The animals no longer are an issue because you have plenty of virus in the new animal host, the human, and it will then spread and continue to spread. And so that's essentially what we believe to be the story. But we still don't have proof for the SARS-2 coronavirus. We don't have proof of the intermediate host, if you like, or of the bat that may carry the closest relative to that virus. So we have lots of unknowns in the whole story. And so you get a lot of these sort of conspiracy theories and so on coming out about laboratories creating viruses and so on. But these, I'm absolutely sure that there's no truth in those conspiracy theories. This is a perfectly plausible story, and given the circumstances, and actually given the examples of many other viruses that do a very similar thing. So if you look at Nipah virus, which was a problem in the Philippines, still a bit of a problem in Bangladesh, this virus also lives in bats, but we know it lives in bats. We actually have isolated it from bats, from fruit bats. And we can show how it spills through fruit farms where the bats go and eat the fruit because they don't have any other choice. The forest is gone. So they then use human forests, if you like. And the virus spills from there to the fruit goes to pigs because they produce pig farms adjacent to these fruit farms, and then from the pigs to the humans. And so you get outbreaks of very, nasty brain disease in humans. So we have some clear stories, and there are many of these things happening at the moment. So it's really all about the landscape changes. The landscape changes, the way people are interacting, how they're moving. So if we look at the movements of viruses around the world, it's about linkages, transport links. The fact that this COVID-19 moved around the globe so quickly was really just a reflection of our new modern transport systems. And nature doesn't ask questions. It doesn't, worry about the fact that humans create these pathways. They just simply use the pathways. Now, the question is really, what can we do about it? I think this is what everybody wants to know. I don't think the answer is through vaccines. I don't think the answer is through some new treatment, some antiviral drug. To me, this is what humans always do. We create a problem and then we look for a solution. And we think we're clever because we do find solutions out. And we find, we have some very clever scientists around the world and so on. But this is not really the issue. The issue is don't create the problem in the first place. You can see with COVID-19 how incapable we are, despite everything, to do anything about it. We're all scratching our heads. Lots of people are rushing around, but by the time the vaccine is available, it'll be over effectively. It'll be too late, really, for the benefit of the vaccine. And we get another epidemic, another pandemic in a couple of years. How many pandemics can this planet cope with? Probably not so many. So I do believe we have to see this as an existential threat. It's something that we are creating through the fact of our damage to biodiversity, our damage to the landscapes within which we live, for reasons of, essentially we want everything as human beings. So we are trying to, we utilize all the natural resources, we create opportunities for ourselves, and we call it wealth, and we practice very bad behavior, I think, in an ecological and a biological sense. And the punishment is that you are putting yourself at risk. And I think, we need to address that. So for me, conservation and species, it's not because they're nice. To me, they're not on the planet because they're a nice thing to look at. I think this is a very big mistake that we make. We think we can put animals into protected areas or into zoos, but actually we're not really solving any problems doing that. We have to give space to nature. And that's actually in every sense, in cities, in suburbs, in agricultural land, and elsewhere. We need to give space to nature. We need to get some sort of ecosystemic stability back into the system. And when you look at ecosystems that are functional, and I work with these things, and I work with viruses in these systems, in a functional ecosystem, with a virus and with the population, they live in balance. You don't see disease. You might see occasional disease where you have an animal on the periphery, if you like, of the population that for some other reason is weak. And then it will be picked out by the virus or the parasite or the bacteria, and it will die. But the core of the population will always be healthy and be fine. So we only see these diseases in these disturbed and disrupted systems. So we need to recognize that, I think, as human beings. And if we do that and adapt to enable space. So what is the easiest way to do that? I mean, people will say to me, fine, that's great. So how do we do that? We have 7 billion people. But think about that 96% of mammals, which are domestic animals. If we reduced our meat consumption on this planet by 75%, which actually is not that difficult, let's face it, as individuals, you could still perhaps eat a little bit of meat if you like it, but you reduce it by 75%, the impact on land is huge, because the space those animals require, but more important, the crops that you need to feed those animals, is a massive amount of land. So if we make a simple adjustment like this, and also give attention to waste in agriculture, ensuring that what agriculture we do is done well and effectively and produces good, nutritious food, that simple piece of action will resolve a lot of our biodiversity issues. And actually will put, I think, things like emerging infectious diseases back where they were, which was, yes, occasionally these things happen and they can have a bit of an impact, but not an existential crisis, which is what we're dealing with now. So we have these two existential crises, climate change and emerging infectious diseases. So I think that's probably, where I can wrap up. So remember, biodiversity is not a luxury. Biodiversity is not for fun. Biodiversity is not to look at. Biodiversity is absolutely essential to human existence.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Richard, for the presentation. And yeah, we'll dive in with questions. We've had a few questions come in on YouTube so far in Slido, and I'll share some of my own over the next few minutes. But you've touched upon something that's interesting, having done 6 of these presentations to kick off the day. The interconnectedness of nature and humanity is something that has come up in every single one, regardless of the field of specialty that our speakers have joined from, and regardless of where they are in the world. You're the first person to touch upon sort of a One Health perspective of unifying, emerging diseases with biodiversity and human populations, and to highlight agriculture as a huge driver of some of these issues. 96% is unfathomable. That's, I think, the essential piece that's going to come away from this presentation. So that if you combine all our cows and sheep and pigs and chickens, they so radically outweigh all the animals that we have in the world, which is fascinating and depressing all at once. And so yes, reducing meat consumption is a key tool for a lot of things to achieve local good. Richard, people, this talk by definition, 20-25 minutes cannot possibly cover the breadth of this topic. Are there resources out there? Are there websites? Are there things that we can guide people online to learn more about One Health perspectives, outbreaks, zoonoses, etc.?
Yeah, you see, it's, you know, there is beginning to be a sort of movement. It's rather fragmented though. So we have the sort of ecosystems health people, the eco health people, we have the planetary health people, we have the One Health people, you know, but they're all the same basically. I think we're all coming to the same point, that we need to look at health and disease in the context of the environment, the animals and plants, and people. So, you know, we can't isolate one from the other. So I think this trend is happening, and you can go, you know, online and look at One Health, sources. There are plenty. You know, there's a very good textbook, I would say now, by a lady called Sharon Dean from the United States, called One Health. It's an introduction to One Health. So if you're really interested, get that book. It's just come out actually, and Sharon's done a very good job. And she's been very balanced. We must remember that health, you know, their professions, the doctors, you know, the vets and so on, but they don't own health. I think this is the point. They are technicians in a way who address medical issues and help us, but actually it's about society. So society has to look at health very holistically and has to recognize those connections between nature, animals, people, and so on. And that we have to get it right, because, you know, we can't live alone. You know, us and robots, it's not going to work. So, you know, to me, we need to find that pathway, and One Health is a nice way to progress that. And when it comes to fear about these things, zoonoses, you know, animal infections that come directly, you know, from animals to people, naturally, are extremely rare, really, really rare. You know, if you ask a doctor, how many zoonoses do you treat a year? Most of them will say, well, I haven't done it my whole career, because they are very rare. But we have these events like COVID-19, which are very, very dramatic. So, you know, one event every 5 years is too much. And so we need to, not be frightened of animals. Actually, the closer you are to them, I think, the healthier you are, because you actually, you know, you create the stability I was telling you about, this ecosystemic stability. If you separate everything, you create vulnerabilities. And if you create unusual genetic forms, which is what you do with domestic animals, you also create an opportunity for these microorganisms to become really, you know, pathogens and become, you know, real monsters actually. And it's our fault. It's not their fault. It's because we create the opportunity for them.
Right. Now, you highlighted as a solutions ecosystem integrity, which of course is the key to a lot of the issues that we're going to be discussing over the next few days. Are there things that individuals at home can do on a local scale or individually within their own lives? Now, you mentioned cutting down on meat consumption will help in the long run. Is there anything else for people that are fearful and want to contribute to, you know, making sure this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I really think it's very simple actually for individuals who have the privilege perhaps to have an acre of land or something which they live on. Give that land to nature. Just, you know, if everybody does that, and that means you don't go and buy a lawnmower and cut everything. You know, you don't get out your chainsaw and cut everything down. Allow it to regenerate. And, you know, the insects and the birds and the reptiles and whatever, they will soon come back. Nature doesn't need a hand. You just have to give it space and the opportunity. So I would say to every individual, if we all did this, just think about it. You know, in the UK, if 65 million people gave what land they have as much as they can to nature, we will solve the biodiversity issue in the UK. You know, we won't need you don't need to invest in it. Nature does it. Nature will do it. We just have to give them space. And that's really why I'm arguing for these sorts of approaches. So, you know, if we change our diet slightly, we actually suddenly create an enormous opportunity for nature to recover. Of course, we mustn't use that opportunity for something else, like building more roads, making more cars, etc. We have to stop, you know, this process that has been sort of destroying so much. And I think everybody can do it. In other words, we can all be conservationists, there's no question. And of course, you know, you must recognize that some people get crushed by elephants, and so they may have to kill the elephant. You know, so in the end, you know, nature and people will have conflicts, and we need to find solutions to those as well.
And we've touched upon wildlife conflicts not only already today, but in a huge variety of our programs here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. But I love this message. In fact, it's a perfect message to wrap up on, is this idea that if you just give space, life will find a way, and you know, accomplish a great deal of good, both in the perspective that you shared today and generally for conservation initiatives around the world. Richard, is there any last other message you'd like to share with us before we wrap up? Because that was a really an excellent one.
No, not really. It's just, you know, it's nature will make you a happy person. Just give it a chance. Thanks very much.
That could be our tagline for this year's BioFestival. That's we might have to steal that. We'll get in touch. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you highlighting your amazing career in this field, and we hope everyone at home had a great time watching and can learn more from some of the resources you suggested. For now, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll keep it up starting in a few minutes with another speaker. Thanks so much, guys. Bye for now.